There are some books of the Bible that most of us are at least somewhat familiar with, if not very familiar. The Gospels come to mind, as do most of Paul's letters. Genesis and Exodus would probably count, as would books like the Psalms and Proverbs and some of the prophets, such as Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. They're familiar for good reason. They are rich in material that is reasonably easy to link to our lives of faith. But there are other books that most of us rarely read from unless we are disciplined about reading through the Bible on a routine basis. Ezra and Nehemiah come to mind, as do books like Leviticus and Numbers, as well as some of the minor prophets like Zephaniah and Zechariah from the Old Testament, and Titus, Philemon, and several others from the New Testament as well. For the next few weeks, I'm going to dip our toe into a few of these books to mine some of the rich, if less familiar, material they contain. By the way, if you have a particular book you'd like me to explore, add a comment below and I'll see to it. Also, if you like these devotionals, would you consider clicking the like button and the share button below? I'd sure appreciate it. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Monday, January 3rd, 2022. Today we'll take a quick look at the brief letter of Paul to Titus. It's a short letter by Paul's standards, just 46 verses in 3 chapters. In my Bible, the entire letter appears on 2 facing pages, so one can read the entire letter without turning a single page. Titus was apparently one of Paul's loyal lieutenants, helping oversee work that Paul had begun while Paul continued his travels. Paul mentions him by name in both Galatians and 2 Corinthians, giving us a clue that he followed up with Paul's work in at least those 2 cities. We also know that he traveled with Paul to Jerusalem. This letter finds him on the island of Crete, where Paul had left him in charge of organizing the church after Paul's evangelizing visit there. The letter itself is fairly unremarkable. Unlike most of Paul's letters, there is not really a section on theology, but instead focuses on mundane advice to Titus as he guides this newly formed church on Crete. This is understandable, since Paul wouldn't have needed to instruct Titus in matters of faith. Paul addresses, though, a laundry list of things Titus should do and insists others do as they grow the church. Some of the advice is dated and no longer applies to us. For example, Paul says that slaves should be submissive to their masters, advice that really has no place in the church today, though slavery was simply part of the social landscape then. He has advice for the qualifications of church officers, as well as instructions on how they should conduct themselves. He has advice on how regular members of the church should behave and what kind of behavior ought not to be tolerated in the church. Now, it would be easy to read this letter as providing us very specific and strict instructions for personal conduct. But I think it's better read not so much with a magnifying glass, looking at every little detail, but rather sort of held at arm's length, as it were, to get a sense of Paul's overall concern. Let me read just a brief passage from this letter and see if I can help us understand what Paul is really after. Tell the older men to be temperate, serious, prudent, and sound in faith, in love, and in endurance. Likewise, tell the older women to be reverent in behavior, not to be slanderers or slaves to drink. They are to teach what is good, so that they may encourage the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be self-controlled, chaste, good managers of the household, kind, being submissive to their husband, so that the word of God may not be discredited. Likewise, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. Show yourself in all respects a model of good works, and in your teaching show integrity, gravity, and sound speech that cannot be censured. Then any opponent will be put to shame, having nothing evil to say of us. all of this suggests to me that Paul's real concern isn't so much to micromanage people's behavior or set rigid rules. It's not really about wives being submissive to husbands. No, his concern is that no one in the church behave in a way that reflects badly on the church. After all, they would have been both a tiny minority and a curiosity among their neighbors. Paul was aware that people would be watching them. What they said in public and how they behaved, both toward each other and toward those outside the church, would have had a major impact, one way or the other, on the church's success or failure. Tomorrow, we'll zoom back a few hundred years to meet Ezra. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.